They have a 76-year-old occupation. We've got 254 years of genocide.
Indigenous Australian activist Robbie Thorpe is attempting to charge Israeli government spokesperson Mark Regev with genocide in the domestic courts. The Israeli diplomat is also an Australian citizen and has spent the last year defending and denying the genocide in Gaza on TV and radio shows.
Every doctor you speak to, every hospital director you speak to, works under the gun of Hamas. They are not independent.
He appeared on national television here, inciting people to join up with the IDF. Something like 1,000 people went over there and joined in, based on his lies, proven to be lies now. And he talk about beheading children and things like that.
To condemn the beheadings, to condemn the burning of babies alive.
My real interest is the genocide that's going on in this country and has been going on since 1770. It's 254 years of unchecked genocide. People don't seem to know nothing about what's going on here. If we can stop the genocide happening in our own backyard, that may do something to support the situation in Palestine.
Both the indigenous populations of Palestine and Australia have faced remarkably similar methods of control and domination from the settlers that colonized their lands. In Palestine, the Israeli settlers used the founding myth that it was a land without a people for a people without a land. In Australia, the myth used by the British was exactly the same.
This country is founded on the basis of a thing called terra nullius, which means empty land. That was the premise of it all. All the institutions in Australia are based on, including the courts. So it has made it very difficult for Aboriginal people. We were forcibly assimilated into to the wider community, or they're attempting to do that. But that's on the back of basically a Holocaust. That's the map of Aboriginal Australia. It's clearly not an empty land. Now, all these are black nations, all with their own language, territory, and basically been exterminated.
Both populations faced massacres and displacement when the colonizers arrived. In Palestine, the 1948 Nakba displaced the majority of the population, while Indigenous Australians faced hundreds of years of slaughter, dislocation, and starvation. It's hard to put an exact figure on the numbers killed, but there were an estimated 500,000 to 1 million Aborigines before the British arrived in the 1770s. By 1900, there were just 50,000. By the 20th century, Indigenous Australians were forced into reserves, effectively concentration camps, so that they could be controlled and any resistance could be quickly crushed.
My great-grandfather was put on a reserve. For 3 generations, they were in those concentration camps here. There's hundreds of those places. They call them reserves and missions. Our people were rounded up and placed in these places and totally controlled our lives. My father was born into that situation, and it was only in his lifetime that Aboriginal people were considered eligible to become Australian citizens. There was no recognition of who we were. They thought that we wouldn't be able to resist, but we had incredible resistance and resilience of Aboriginal people. We're just not giving up our sacred land. It's our mother. We call the land our mother. And we think, well, what people in their right mind would sell their own mother? You know, we have a different way of looking at land and law. That's where the wealth of Britain comes from, colonising other countries and pillaging and plundering the resources. That's what it's really all about.
Given this shared history of occupied land, invasion and subjugation, there have been links between the Palestinian resistance movement and Aboriginal struggle going back more than 50 years. These have grown and solidified since the 7th of October last year. In Melbourne, Robbie and other Indigenous activists hold a weekly protest in solidarity with Gaza.
We have strong relationships with Palestine. In fact, the first rally I ever went to in my life was a Palestinian rally back in 1972. It was explained to me that it's an illegal occupation and there's been genocidal oppression been going on there the whole time since 1948. Our struggle's growing stronger and stronger. More and more people in Australia are starting to understand the idea of genocide. which wasn't the case not that long ago. You couldn't even mention the word genocide here.
Robbie's case was thrown out by Australia's Director of Public Prosecutions the day before it was supposed to go to court. But Robbie's fight is by no means over. Not only has he filed a case against the British Crown over the Indigenous genocide in Australia, he also plans to appeal this decision and bring Mark Regev to court.
They have a 76-year-old occupation. We've got 254 years of genocide. If you can't prevent genocide in your country, you're hardly a civilised society. You need to be able to prevent things like genocide and punish people for the crime.
Thank you, everyone.